Let's start with the date, because I think context is really everything here. It is Saturday, January 24th, 2026.
Mm.
And if you've been, tracking the headlines, or maybe more painfully, checking your own bank account or just scrolling through job alerts, you've probably felt this really specific kind of uncomfortable sensation.
Yeah.
The world doesn't just feel volatile. It feels split.
Split is exactly the right word. I mean, we are looking at a bifurcation in the global economy and especially in the labor market that is, well, it's unlike anything we've seen in maybe 40 or 50 years.
It's not a recession, though. That's the weird part.
It's definitely not a recession, but it is certainly not a boom for everyone either.
No, it's a complete split-screen reality. I was looking through all the data we've got for this deep dive, and it just struck me that depending on who you are, and, more specifically, depending on what skills you have and who's signing your paycheck, 2026 is either the start of a golden age or it's a grinding dead end.
Yeah. Absolutely. On one side of that screen, you've got this incredible acceleration. Technology is moving faster than it ever has. Fortunes are being made in, days? And we literally have robots walking off assembly lines.
And then you flip to the other side of the screen.
And on that other side, you have stagnation. You have the old compact, the idea that you go to school, you get your degree, you get an entry-level job, and you climb the ladder. That whole mechanism is just, it's broken.
The rungs are missing from the ladder.
The rungs are missing. That's a perfect way to put it.
So we're calling this the stark divide.
Yeah.
We borrowed that phrase from the HR dive analysis we're looking at, but honestly, it permeates everything we've got in front of us. It's in the Quint salary guide. It's in the JP Morgan 2026 Outlook.
It's the through line for the whole year so far.
So here's the mission for this deep dive. We need to unpack why. Why is the middle of that career ladder just evaporating? We need to get to the bottom of why some people are seeing their paychecks explode while others are, in effect, taking a pay cut even though they're working harder than ever.
And to do that, you can't just look at one thing. We have to look at the convergence of three really massive forces. It's not as simple as AI took my job.
Right.
It's the intersection of artificial intelligence, this growing global fragmentation, and a really sticky kind of structural inflation.
Yeah, it's too easy to just point the finger at the algorithm. We need to follow the money. So let's start with the salary landscape.
Yeah.
Because the numbers in the Quint 2026 salary guide are, frankly, they're startling.
They really are.
We're not seeing a uniform trend. It's not a simple story of wages are up or wages are down. It's entirely dependent on your proximity to the machine.
The disparity is just, it's glaring. Let's look at the winners first, just to set the baseline.
Yeah.
If you're a machine learning engineer, right now, in early 2026, the median salary growth is hitting 6% year over year.
6%. And in a vacuum, that's solid. That's healthy.
It's very healthy growth, but like you said, we don't live in a vacuum.
No, we live in an economy where inflation has been stubbornly persistent. So that's 6%. That's real, actual growth in your pocket. But then you look at a role like, say, a copy editor.
And their growth is it's sitting at 2.8%.
2.8%.
And we have to be realistic about what that means. If inflation is hovering around, 3.5%, which we'll get to when we talk about the JP Morgan report, a 2.8% raise is a loss.
It's a loss in purchasing power. You are poorer at the end of the year than you were at the start, even with a raise.
Exactly. You're running on a treadmill that's speeding up.
And that, right there, is the stark divide in real dollars and cents terms. But I want to dig into the why. Why is the copy editor lagging so far behind? Is it just simple supply and demand, too many editors, not enough engineers?
It's deeper than that. The Quint guide uses this really telling phrase. It describes these roles as less connected to digital transformation. That 2.8% figure isn't just about copy editors. It's emblematic of a whole swath of roles that are, easily augmented or even replaced by automated tools. If an AI can do 80% of the syntax checking, the grammar correction,
then the value of the human doing that specific task gets compressed.
It gets compressed, exactly. The human in that narrow function becomes a commodity.
Whereas the machine learning engineer is the opposite.
Yeah.
They are the scarcity. But there's a new category that's emerging here that I found really fascinating. It's not just the people building the machines, it's the people managing them.
The AI product manager.
Yes.
This is the new royalty in the corporate structure. The data is showing median base salaries for AI product managers hitting $162,000.
$162,000. And these aren't necessarily the people writing the Python code, right? They're not the ones training the neural networks themselves.
Not always, no. These are the people who understand how to wield the tool. They're the translators. They can speak the language of business and the language of the machine and bridge that gap.
That distinction wielding versus building, that feels incredibly important. It reminds me a little bit of the early internet era. First, all the money was in building the physical stuff, the routers, the fiber optics.
Sure.
But then the real fortunes were made by the people who figured out how to build businesses on top of that infrastructure.
That is a perfect analogy. The guide actually calls this the niche is now normal phenomenon. 3 years ago, having LLM integration on your resume was, a niche, almost exotic skill.
Right. It was a bonus.
It was a bonus. Now it's the primary driver of your pay. If you can combine deep domain knowledge, let's say you're an expert in supply chain logistics or healthcare regulations, and you can combine that with the ability to apply AI at scale.
You're commanding a massive premium.
A massive premium, but
Right.
if you just have the domain knowledge and you've ignored that AI layer,
Then you're the copy editor. You're getting the 2.8% raise.
you're fighting a deflationary force with your bare hands and you're going to lose.
There's another layer to this data that I think is even more important for people to understand, especially if you're looking for a job right now. It is not just about what you do. It's about where you do it. The enterprise premium this year is absolutely massive.
This is the one statistic that made me stop and actually reread the report just to make sure I
Yeah,
saw it correctly.
Me too.
The data indicates that enterprise companies, and they define that here as these giants with 10,000 or more employees, they're paying median-based salaries that are 42.8% higher than other large companies.
42.8%.
Yeah.
I mean, that is not a margin of error. That's a different tax bracket.
It's a different life.
Usually you see a variance of what? 10%, maybe 15% between a mid-sized company and a massive one. What on earth is driving a gap of nearly 45%?
It all comes down to capital leverage. Just think about what is required to make an employee truly productive in 2026. It is no longer just a laptop and a Zoom account. To really leverage AI, you need proprietary data lakes. You need massive compute infrastructure. You need enterprise licenses for the most advanced, what we're now calling agentic models. And those licenses are incredibly expensive.
So the big companies, the Googles, the JP Morgan Chases, the Pfizers of the world, they're the only ones with the war chest big enough to buy the heavy machinery of the AI age.
They're the only ones. They have the capital moat. And the Quent report points out that leadership roles at these giants saw an 8.6% pay jump on average.
Wow.
A CTO or a head of engineering at one of these enterprise firms, their median salary is now $434,453.
$434,000.
They're hoarding the top talent because they're the only ones who can afford the infrastructure to make that talent exponentially productive. A brilliant engineer is worth 10 times more inside Google than they are at a 500-person company because of the tools they have access to.
So if you're that mid-sized firm, that respectable company with, say, 500 employees, you are in an impossible bind. You can't afford the $434,000 CTO, and you definitely can't afford the $500 million data center.
You are structurally disadvantaged. You're bringing a knife to a gunfight.
And that disadvantage has to trickle all the way down to the entry level. This is where the Quent report gives a really specific and kind of dire warning. It says, and I'm quoting here, slow entry-level wage growth threatens future leadership development.
And that connects directly, perfectly to this whole crisis of the junior employee.
Right. If the big companies are poaching all the leaders and the mid-sized companies are getting squeezed, who is left to hire the juniors? We have this article from CIO, and the title is literally, Is AI Eradicating the Junior Developer? And, well, the answer is pretty bleak.
It's a crisis of the pipeline. It really is.
Yeah.
For the last, 10 or 15 years, the advice was universal. Learn to code. It was the golden ticket to a stable, upper-middle-class life. But look at the numbers now. Software development roles, overall, declined 3.5% year over year. The broader tech sector is down nearly a third since its peak in 2020.
The demand has softened because the tools themselves have fundamentally changed. We need to talk about vibe coding. I know it sounds like a Gen Z buzzword.
It does.
But the CIO article treats it as a really serious architectural shift in how we create software.
And it is. It's a fundamental shift in the level of abstraction. Vibe coding essentially means you're using generative AI to create software with plain language prompts.
So instead of writing the code, you're just describing it.
You're describing the function. In the past, you had to know the syntax. You needed to know where the semicolon went, how to structure a class, how to manage memory. Now you just describe the vibe of what you want the software to do. Make me a button that turns red when you click it and sends an email. and the AI generates the code for you.
So on the surface, that sounds incredible. It lowers the barrier to entry. I can build an app without spending 4 years getting a computer science degree, but the article's argument is that this is actually destroying the profession from the inside out.
It's destroying the learning process. It touches on this concept called the productive struggle.
Mm-hmm.
Think about when you're learning math in elementary school. You have to struggle through long division by hand to actually understand how numbers relate to each other.
Sure.
If you just use a calculator from day one, you'll always get the right answer, but you will never understand the underlying logic.
Right. You get the what, but not the how or the why.
Precisely. And the article's point is that coding is thinking. It's logic structuring. It's problem decomposition.
And if the AI does all the grunt work, the debugging, the basic script writing, the unit tests, the junior developer never gets to experience that productive struggle.
Yeah.
They never bang their head against the wall for 3 days trying to track down a memory leak.
And while that sounds pleasant, I mean, nobody enjoys banging their head against a wall. That struggle is how you learn. It's how you build a mental model of the system's architecture. It's how you develop intuition.
Yes, intuition.
And if you remove that struggle, you create what the article calls a hollow industry. You've got your senior architects who learned the hard way 10 years ago, and then you have the AI. But there is no one in the middle. There's no pipeline of juniors becoming seniors because the juniors aren't getting the reps. They're just prompting an AI.
And the AI itself is getting better and better at doing it without them. We're not just talking about ChatGPT writing a little snippet of code anymore. We have moved into the era of agentic AI. We should probably define that because the jump from generative to agentic is massive.
It's a huge leap. It's the difference between, say, a chatbot and an actual employee. Generative AI is passive. It waits for you to ask a question, and then it gives you an answer. Agentic AI, and this is the stuff built on models like Claude Sonnet 4.5 or Gemini 3, which dropped late last year. It has agency. You give it a high-level goal, like refactor this entire code base to be more secure, and it goes off and works on its own.
It creates its own to-do list to achieve the goal.
Correct. It works in a loop. It writes code, it tests the code, it sees an error, it reflects on the error, it rewrites the code, it tests it again. The new tools from Microsoft and Anthropic allow for what they're calling unsupervised software development sessions that can last for 24 hours straight.
Unsupervised. That's the game changer. You could literally go to sleep, the agent works all night, and you wake up to a finished pull request in your inbox.
It is a miracle for productivity and for the company's bottom line. But for the junior developer, it's an extinction-level event. Why would I, as a manager, hire a junior for $80,000 a year who makes mistakes and learns slowly when I can spin up an AI agent for a fraction of a cent per token that works 24/7 with zero complaints and learns instantly?
It is the ultimate eating the seed corn problem. We are maximizing our efficiency today at the direct cost of having any experts tomorrow. And I want to pivot here because this isn't just a tech bro problem in Silicon Valley. We are seeing a near-perfect mirror image of this disaster playing out in the legal industry.
Oh, absolutely. The legal profession is arguably even more vulnerable because their entire business model was, for a century, built on inefficiency.
The billable hour.
The billable hour. It's essentially a tax on how long it takes a human brain to read and write.
And robots read really, really fast. We've got the Best Law Firms 2026 report here, right, and also some data from the American Bar Association. The headline is that the legal market is bifurcating just like the salary market. There are leaders and there are laggards.
And the tension is just palpable. The clients, the big corporations who are paying the massive legal bills, they know the technology exists. They know that a contract review that used to take a team of 5 associates 40 hours can now be done by an AI in 40 seconds. So they are starting to refuse to pay for the 40 hours.
The report says only 24% of in-house professionals are happy with how their outside law firms are using AI to cut costs.
So the clients are demanding efficiency, but the law firms are absolutely terrified of cannibalizing their own revenue streams.
It's the classic innovator's dilemma. If I adopt this new technology, I kill my cash cow. But if I don't, my competitor will and I'll die anyway.
Right, but the most immediate human cost here is the reversal of what used to be called the in-house dream. For decades, if you were a burnt-out lawyer at a big firm, the exit strategy was to go in-house. You'd go work for a corporation.
Better hours, stock options, more stability.
Exactly, it was the safe harbor. But now the corporations are the ones cutting the legal jobs.
Because they're the ones adopting the AI first.
They're adopting it fastest. Look at Microsoft. They laid off a significant chunk of their in-house counsel just recently. And the demographic of who got laid off was incredibly telling. It was mostly lawyers with 3 to 7 years of experience.
There it is again. The middle. The people who are competent and expensive, but not yet the general counsel.
That 3 to 7 year window is the grunt work window in a legal career. It's drafting standard agreements, reviewing documents for discovery, compliance checking. It is exactly what agentic AI excels at. So these companies are saying, we don't need an army of mid-level lawyers anymore. We need a few senior strategists and a lot of compute.
So we're actually seeing this bizarre trend reversal where junior lawyers are fleeing back to the big law firms.
Yes, they're running back to the billable hour model, hoping it protects them. But it's a false sanctuary, because inside the firms, the adoption is completely chaotic. You have this really dangerous phenomenon of shadow AI cropping up.
Shadow AI. That sounds ominous, like something out of a spy novel. But in practice, it's just a terrifying liability, isn't it?
It is a compliance and ethics nightmare. Shadow AI just means that individual lawyers, and the report says it's about 31% of them, are using AI tools personally on their own devices or their own accounts, even if their firm has not officially sanctioned it.
So you can imagine a junior associate who's just drowning in work. He takes a highly confidential non-disclosure agreement, uploads it to a public version of ChatGPT or some other model, and just says, summarize the key risks in this for me.
And just like that, he has potentially breached attorney-client privilege. He's fed confidential client data into a public model's training set. They're doing it to survive, to keep up with the workload, but the institutional risk is absolutely massive.
So everyone is just scrambling. The coders are competing with AI agents. The lawyers are using shadow AI just to stay afloat. It all feels so chaotic. But I want to zoom out for a second. We need to understand the why. Why is the pressure so high? Why is inflation sticking around? JP Morgan released their Outlook 2026, and they framed this whole situation through 3 major macro forces.
This report is essential because it moves us away from just looking at tech as this abstract thing and forces us to look at the physical reality of the economy.
The atoms, not just the bits.
The atoms, not just the bits. JP Morgan identifies the 3 forces as artificial intelligence, fragmentation, and inflation.
Okay, let's start with AI, but from the investment and the physical side. Everyone is asking the same question. Is this a bubble? We see these massive valuations. The hype is everywhere. Are we in 1999 all over again?
JP Morgan's argument is no, or at least not yet. And the evidence they point to is the CapEx, the capital expenditure.
The actual spending.
The actual spending. Big tech has tripled its CapEx to over $500 billion in 2026.
$500 billion. It's an amount of money that's hard to even visualize.
It's nation-state level spending. And they aren't just buying software licenses, they are building physical infrastructure. But this leads to a massive physical constraint that I don't think the average person really appreciates yet: power.
Electricity. The grid itself.
The demand for electricity is exponential. The report highlights that OpenAI alone has plans for 25 gigawatts of data center capacity. Now, just to give you some context, a standard large nuclear reactor produces about 1 gigawatt of power.
So you're saying OpenAI effectively needs 25 nuclear reactors just to run its future models?
That's the demand they're projecting. And you can't just, buy a nuclear reactor on Amazon Prime. There's a 5-year backlog for critical power generation equipment right now. We're talking about transformers, transmission lines, the copper itself.
And it's not just power, it's water too. I saw the note about opposition building in Phoenix and Tucson.
That's the other huge physical constraint. These data centers generate immense heat. They need to be cooled, and that's usually done with water. So placing these massive water-guzzling facilities in the middle of the desert is creating some very real local and political friction.
So AI isn't just code floating in the cloud. It is water rights in Arizona, it's land use permits, and it's 25 nuclear reactors worth of power.
Which explains why it's so expensive and why only the enterprise giants can really afford to play the game at the highest level.
Okay, let's move to the second force from the report: fragmentation. JP Morgan makes a very bold claim here. They say, essentially, that globalization is dead.
It's a stark realization. We've moved from the era of cheapest origin, where you just buy your components or your finished goods from whoever makes them cheapest, whether that's China or Vietnam and Mexico.
Right.
We've moved from that to the era of rules of origin.
Meaning that politics now matters more than the sticker price.
Exactly. National security matters more than pure economic efficiency. The report notes that U.S. effective tariff rates are sitting at 15–20%. Imports from China have dropped from making up 22% of the total down to just 12%. The decoupling is real and it's measurable.
And this creates a whole new map of the world, politically and economically. The global south is becoming this strategic battleground.
Absolutely. Look at the expansion of the BRICS group. Iran, Egypt, the UAE all just joined. But the real story for 2026, JP Morgan argues, might be South America.
Why South America?
Because South America essentially owns the periodic table.
For raw materials.
All of them. If you want to build this AI revolution, you need copper for the grid and the chips. You need lithium for the batteries to store the energy. South America holds 40% of the world's global copper reserves. Chile and Argentina are the lithium kings. In a fragmented world, if you own the dirt that contains the future, you have massive strategic leverage.
So if you're the U.S. or China, you are scrambling to secure those resources, which drives up the cost of everything, which leads us directly to the third force, structural inflation.
This is why the copy editor's 2.8% raise feels like a real terms pay cut. The inflation we're seeing now is stickier than what we're used to.
Because resilience is more expensive.
That's it in a nutshell. Efficiency, which is what globalization was all about, was deflationary. It made things cheap. Resilience, building your factories in Ohio instead of Shenzhen, securing your copper from friendly nations instead of geopolitical rivals, is inflationary. It costs more to be safe than it does to be efficient.
So we are in a high-cost, high-tech, fragmented world. That is the macro backdrop for everything we're seeing. Now, I want to pivot to a company that sits right at the intersection of all of this. Energy, AI, manufacturing. Let's talk about Tesla. According to this analysis we have from Trading Key, 2026 is the year that Tesla finally stops being seen as just a car company and officially becomes a deep tech company.
The market is finally waking up to this pivot. You know, Tesla missed their Q4 2025 delivery numbers, and the stock took a hit initially. The old guard was worried about car sales, but the smart money is looking past the cars. The entire narrative has shifted to the robotaxi and the Optimus robot.
Okay, let's talk about the robotaxi first, the Cybercab. The report says mass production begins this April.
And it's the economics that are the real disruptor here. Tesla is claiming that the robotaxi will cost just $0.81 per mile to operate.
81 cents.
Yeah.
I mean, that's cheaper than a bus ticket in most cities. It's certainly cheaper than owning a Toyota Camry when you factor in insurance and gas and maintenance.
It completely changes the math of personal transportation. But the underlying technological achievement is their vision-only approach. Their competitors, like Waymo, rely on LiDAR and high-definition maps, you know, those spinning buckets you see on top of the cars. That equipment is very expensive, and it's fragile.
And Tesla's doing it all with just cameras.
Just cameras and a massive amount of AI. It's a more biological approach. Humans drive with 2 eyes, cameras, and a brain, a neural net. Tesla is trying to replicate that. The fact that they finally achieved that full coast-to-coast autonomous drive that user David Moss posted in January, it validates the idea that you don't need the expensive LiDAR. You just need enough data and enough compute.
But the bigger disruption, and this ties right back to our whole labor market discussion, is Optimus, the humanoid robot.
Version 3 is debuting in March, and we are not talking about prototypes dancing in spandex suits on a stage anymore. We're talking about plans for mass production by the end of this year. DHL, the global logistics giant, is already integrating Tesla semis and, crucially, is looking at humanoid robot integration for their warehouses.
And this is where the rubber really meets the road for the labor market. We talked about AI replacing the junior coder. If Optimus actually works, are we looking at the replacement of the warehouse worker, the factory worker, the delivery person?
We have to assume the answer is yes. If a robot can move boxes, load trucks, and navigate a warehouse floor for just the cost of electricity and some occasional maintenance, the wage floor for most physical labor simply collapses.
So there's almost nowhere to hide. You can't just learn to code because the AI does it better. You can't just rely on physical work because the robot will do it cheaper.
It forces us to confront the logical endgame of all this technology. And actually, Bill Gates gave an interview recently, it was covered by Windows Central, where he predicts exactly where this is all going.
The 10-year horizon, what's his take?
Gates predicts that AI will effectively replace doctors and tutors within a decade. He calls it the era of free intelligence.
Free intelligence. What does he mean by that?
It's a pretty radical concept. Imagine if a medical diagnosis was a commodity. You don't need to wait 3 weeks to see a specialist. Your phone can diagnose you with higher accuracy than a human doctor instantly and for free.
That sounds utopian on one level.
Mm.
Healthcare for everyone.
Yeah.
World-class education available to every kid with a smartphone.
It does. But Gates himself admits that it's scary because there is, in his words, no upper bound. If intelligence is free, what is the value of a medical degree that cost $500,000? What is the value of a PhD?
That's a good question. However, I want to bring in a counterpoint here, and it actually came from the comments section of that article, a user named Natty69.
I saw that comment. It was surprisingly profound for a username like that.
It was. Natty69 argued that AI, for all its power, cannot see the big picture. It can write syntactically correct code, but it doesn't know why the business needs that code in the first place. It can diagnose a symptom from a scan, but can it understand the patient's life context, their family, their fears?
And that connects perfectly back to our junior developer paradox. You need years of experience to be able to see the big picture. But if AI prevents you from getting that entry-level experience in the first place, you never develop the wisdom to see it.
We risk creating a world with infinite intelligence, but zero wisdom.
That's a terrifying thought.
Which brings us to the ultimate question in all of this. If the robots do the work, and the AI does the thinking, and intelligence itself becomes free, who gets paid?
This is the ownership crisis. We read a paper by the economist Richard Freeman titled, "Ownership When AI Robots Do More of the Work." The title really says it all.
Okay, break down the Freeman argument for us. What's the core idea?
It starts with this fundamental shift in what economists call comparative advantage. For all of human history, humans had the advantage in cognitive tasks. We were the thinkers. Now, for the first time, machines are gaining that advantage.
Right.
Freeman argues that if a robot does the work, the income from that work doesn't go to a worker in the form of a wage. It goes to the owner of the robot in the form of profit.
It's capital income versus labor income.
Exactly. And if we as a society continue to rely on wages, on labor income, we are in serious trouble. We're already seeing it with the copy editors versus the machine learning engineers. The copy editors' labor is becoming less valuable, so their wages stagnate. Meanwhile, the owners of the AI, the capital, are seeing record profits.
So the solution isn't just learn more skills or get a better degree. It's that we have to fundamentally change how we get paid.
That's Freeman's argument. He suggests a move toward broad-based ownership. He says if labor income is going to fall for the majority of people, then capital income must rise for the average person to compensate.
So things like employee ownership schemes, where the workers literally own a piece of the robots that are replacing them. Profit sharing.
Exactly. And he also mentions citizen ownership.
What does he mean by that?
Think of it like a sovereign wealth fund, like they have in Norway or Alaska. If the U.S. economy is eventually run by autonomous AI agents and fleets of robots, then those robots and agents should be taxed, and the proceeds should go into a national fund that pays a dividend to every single citizen.
It's a kind of social hedge.
It's a social hedge against your own obsolescence.
Wow.
Because without something like that, we are headed toward a new kind of techno-feudalism. A tiny elite owns the enterprise AI stacks and the robot fleets, and everyone else is left to fight for the scraps of work that still require a human touch.
Okay, we have covered a massive amount of ground. From the 2.8% raise for copy editors, all the way to the 25 gigawatts of power needed for OpenAI, to the $81 robotaxi. Let's try to synthesize all this for the listener. What does it all mean? 2026 is a year of friction.
It is. It's the friction between the old world where you trade your hours for dollars and the new world where your leverage comes from owning the code and owning the machines. It's the friction between a globalized, efficient supply chain and a fragmented, secure one.
So practically speaking, what does our listener do with all this information? What's the takeaway?
I think the first thing is to realize that being average is now the danger zone. The middle is falling out. You can no longer afford to be a pretty good coder or a decent lawyer or a fine project manager.
And you have to move up the stack.
You have to move up to the conceptual layer. You have to become the architect, the strategist, the person who asks the why, not just the person who executes the how.
Be the AI product manager, not the copy editor. Wield the tool, don't just be the tool.
That's the first thing. Second, pay very close attention to that enterprise premium. If you are in a mid-sized company that is clearly falling behind on tech adoption, you might be on a sinking ship. You have to look for the organizations that have the capital moat to survive this transition.
And third, and maybe this is the most important, think about ownership.
Yes, you have to diversify how you earn. Don't just rely on your paycheck. You need to find ways to get exposure to the capital side of the economic equation, whether that's through stock or equity in your company or owning other assets that AI can't easily replicate.
I want to leave everyone with a final thought to chew on. We talked about Bill Gates and this idea of free intelligence. And we talked about Optimus and the idea of cheap labor.
Right.
So if intelligence becomes abundant and free,
Hmm.
and physical labor becomes abundant and cheap, what is the one thing left in the economy that is actually scarce?
It brings us right back to the human element, doesn't it?
It has to.
Hmm.
If I can get a more accurate diagnosis from an AI, maybe the premium I'm willing to pay is for a doctor who actually looks me in the eye, holds my hand, and cares about the outcome. If a robot can make my coffee perfectly every time, maybe I'll pay extra for a human barista who remembers my name and asks about my day.
So we might be moving toward an economy where our only unique, valuable asset, the only thing we can sell that a machine can't print on demand, is our own humanity.
Right.
Our ability to care, to connect, to empathize, to create real community.
Which is deeply ironic, isn't it? The robot age might be the very thing that forces us to become more human than ever, just to survive.
That would be the ultimate plot twist.
It's something to think about as you watch the headlines this week. Keep learning, keep adapting, and don't forget to look at the big picture. We'll see you in the next Deep Dive.
Take care.